I'm Keith Sawyer, and you're listening to The Science of Creativity, a podcast about art, design, and invention. Today's episode is about a new smartphone app called Messier. Their tagline is, the platform for those who want to unleash their creativity. I've invited their scientific advisor, Dr. Zorana Ivcevic Pringle, who's a well-known creativity researcher, and also co-founder Josh Seidenfeld, to tell us about the design of Messier and to talk about how the app is grounded in creativity research. Zorana and Josh, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Now, I've been playing around with the Messier app, and my first reaction was, it's beautiful. I just really enjoy looking at it. And it seems like it's a collection of creativity activities. My analogy, I was thinking it's almost like cards in a virtual creativity card deck. So, Josh, you're the CEO, you're the co-founder of the company. The company's also called Messier. Could you tell us a little bit about the Messier app? How does it work? How does it help foster creativity?
Yeah, so initially the inspiration was meditation apps, which have done a lot of good for a lot of people. So we were initially called it kind of a headspace or a calm for creativity. The idea was to let's help people build a creative practice, with the idea being that, you know, a few minutes of creativity every day is better than 0 minutes a day. So we call it like a headspace for creativity, or we're also inspired by apps like Duolingo for language, or Noom for weight loss, other habit building apps like that. I love the card analogy, and it would also, I think it's the analogy to those other apps is useful because we're really thinking about how do we reach out to users and engage them and use all the goodies of phones, of mobile technology to build a habit.
Right. Yeah. And of course, it's an app. I've installed it on my iPhone and also on an Android phone that I have. And yeah, it's working great on both of them.
Awesome.
Now, could you give a specific example of one of the activities that a user might encounter if you're in the app and I'm looking for something that might foster my creativity or spark my creativity that day? Yeah, what's an example of something I might encounter in the Messier app?
Sure. So we call the activities or the creative prompts, we call them Messier moments. So there are currently about 500 Messier moments in the app. The idea was, you know, this is not an app to help people, you know, excel at a domain. This is not an app to learn how to be a great painter. This is an app to help you do something, anything creative every single day. And so sort of the watchword is low barrier to entry. So for example, one would be, you know, write a 6-word story, or sort of a classic, you know, draw a picture looking at something without looking at your paper, like a blind contour. And we also are interested in activities that people might not consider artistic if they're intimidated by art. One of our favorites comes from James Kaufman, by a colleague of his, which is sort of a divergent thinking exercise. And it goes, there's a wedding happening in your town this weekend, and you really don't want to go, you know, it's a friend's wedding. You really don't want to go. Set a timer for 2 minutes and list as many excuses for not going as possible. So broad range. We also have some photography. We even have movement and dance. We're really trying to give people as many options as possible. But we also, when you open the app, you'll see a moment of the day. We try to not have people be overwhelmed by choice. And so they're just hit with like, you know, here's something for you so you don't have to choose.
You just mentioned a Messier moment, which was writing a story. And there's one Messier moment, one of the activities that I really liked. It's called alphabet fiction. And here's what it says. Write a very short story where each sentence begins with the next sequential letter of the alphabet. Now, I really like that because it taps into an aspect of creativity that I've found in my research, that people are often more creative when they have some constraints on the process. Like in this case, you don't just say write a short story, you say write a short story with a pretty severe constraint where every sentence begins with the next letter of the alphabet. So in my view, that actually is going to help people be a little more creative, or especially if they're not feeling inspired to write a short story, having that constraint, in a way it frees them. And a lot of your cards are like that.
100%. We are completely in love with constraints, and we think that they're kind of the secret sauce to creativity. We've worked with a bunch of experts, including our psych experts like Zorana. We also have worked with people who've led corporate creativity workshops for many years, and they all tell us, without fail, you've got to give people a pretty small sandbox to play in if you want this to be an easy and enjoyable experience for them. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about constraints. The other fun thing about constraints, like the example that you mentioned, is that you could then very easily use that to make different variations of an exercise, because it was, we can talk more about this later, but coming up with the messier moments was one of the hardest parts of the design process. And so with something like that, you can have sort of a category of like constraint based stories. And so the next iteration could be an acrostic poem where, of course, each word starts with a letter from a word. So it could be, think of, someone who you really love and write an acrostic poem based on the letters of their name.
Well, you mentioned having some creativity consultants, and I've looked on your website. You have a really impressive team of advisors, both the creativity researcher advisors, and then some people that have done workshops, have a lot of consulting experience. Some of these messier moments seem like something that you might do in a workshop. Zorana, you're a leading creativity researcher at Yale University. You were one of the scientific advisors while Messier was developing the app. So could you say a little bit about the role that creativity research played? How is the app based in creativity research?
The app is based in creativity research in several ways. First, there is a lot of research that shows that people in general, when they think of the word creativity, tend to think about art in various ways. If we ask people to create symbols for creativity, oftentimes they prominently include symbols such as paint brushes or colors. If we ask people to tell us whether they consider themselves creative and what creative achievements they have, and they're basing that on, they say they consider themselves creative if they have creative achievements in the arts. So there's this arts bias in lay perceptions of creativity. And the Messier app is very much aware of that existing, but also aware that creativity does not stop there. So it includes activities that go much beyond the arts. And certainly, they include artistic activities of writing and drawing and photography, which is my personal favorite, but they also include problem solving and invention and games that we would call in the research world divergent thinking exercises. So it is much broader than the arts. And then a big thing that the app is doing is saying, by showing that creativity can be learned. It is not a trait you are born with and that's what you have, but it is something that can be nurtured and developed.
Well, a few minutes ago, Josh said something that you connected with, this notion of creativity across the domains. And in creativity research, we'll often talk about domain-specific creativity and contrasting that with domain general creativity, which is creative skills or mindsets that you could apply to anything you do. And then domain-specific creativity is the specific nature of creativity that might be involved in, and you mentioned photography, for example. And the Messier app, I think it does a good job of, in a way, it taps into both, because a few minutes ago, Josh said the ambition is domain general creativity. But when you look at all the Messier moments, they scan across a really broad range of domains. I was really intrigued to see culinary creativity, right? And photography, like you mentioned, there's dance and physical movement. These activities really do run the gamut across different creative domains. So it seems like all of these domains, whichever one you get involved with, they tap into the same creative mindsets or creative abilities. I think that's your ambition with the app, right?
I really like how you mentioned the whole range of domains. By design, the app is acknowledging that there is something that is domain general about creativity, and we if we are doing photography, we are doing that in the moment and we're using a particular set of skills. When we are applying a creative process in cooking, I like baking, for instance, we are using something that is similar, but some things that are only partially overlapping in skills. And that is by design part of the app, where also it's providing opportunities to people to not just choose one. So you do not have to choose one and be locked in one, saying, I am a photographer, or I am a cook, or I am a dancer. Well, you can sample. You can try something that you normally don't do, and see how it can apply, how some skills can apply across contexts.
I see what you mean. So then if you get one of the activities as a photography activity, then that is something that anyone could do, even if they're not really a great photographer. Is that what you're getting at?
Exactly. How people enter different activities is certainly going to differ. There isn't one way of entering, but people can enter an activity from something that feels familiar or something that is a hobby or a preferred activity, but then it's possible to expand and try something different. Or in times when we are stuck in doing our creative work in everyday life, whatever our domain of work might be, you may pull up the Messier app and try something different. We know from research on creative block, creative impasse, that doing something that is challenging still takes effort and still takes thinking, but is different from our work, can help us get unblocked.
Oh, that's interesting. Like in my case, when I was going through the Messier app, and like Josh said a few minutes ago, there are 500 different activities, and I couldn't do all of them. So I tended to home in on the ones that were already things I was familiar with. So I'll give you an example. One of them is called The Art of Deconstruction, which at first I'm thinking deconstructionist literary theory or something. But when you look at the activity, here's what it says: take apart an existing appliance or a piece of technology and invent a new use for every part. So I really like that because I'm mechanical and I'm a tinkerer. So I thought, oh, I'm going to grab that card and I'm going to spend all weekend doing the art of deconstruction. But then, Zorana, you mentioned maybe there's something problematic if a user is going to pick activities that they are already good at or that they already know how to do, but you're tapping into this creativity research, which I'm familiar with, which says you can be enhanced in creativity if you do something that's outside your comfort zone or you do something you really don't know much about. So how can you get users to do something new? If they're going to be like me, they're going to go to the app and they're going to pick things they already like doing. Is there some advice you could give a user to steer them to new stuff?
I have recently come across a quote by Georgia O'Keeffe, and she said that she was terrified of absolutely everything she ever did in life, but that never prevented her from doing it. And I am in love with this quote because it very much resonates with me. You do not have to be exactly comfortable doing something, you can just try it out. And if something is new, you are not going to be good at it at first, but it might be intriguing. So, remembering that the sense of accomplishment, the sense of feeling good, the sense of, yes, I can do this, what we call in research creative self efficacy, is not something that you are born with, is not something that you necessarily even start with. It is built with activity and practice. So you can challenge yourself to use the activity of the day. And if you do that, they are going to come in sometimes those activities that are yours preferred and comfortable ones, but at other times, something that on your own you might not choose. And if you challenge yourself to do it, maybe not every day, but occasionally, you are going to find that with time you can become more comfortable or at least more willing to try something different.
You mentioned the activity of the day. And I notice this too when I open up the Messier app, and the first thing that pops up is a recommended Messier moment or recommended activity. So I don't know if this is a technical question or not for Josh. So is that activity random? Do you just randomly pick one of the 500, or do you have a smaller set of them that you think are particularly good for being, use this today?
We program them manually currently. So it's like, which is actually really fun. We do it by the month, and it's kind of like making a mixtape for the month. So for May, we partnered with a creativity consultancy that we have a relationship with. And also one of the principals is one of our advisors, Michael Scalen. And we actually did another limited rebellion prompts or messier moments effectively written by them for the month of May. And then they had a LinkedIn group where people were posting their responses. So we do them manually now. At some point, as we evolve, there will be, AI learning from users. And it could be that different users actually get different moments of the day. But currently the decision is for, hopefully at some point soon, we have many, many thousands of users. They're all doing the same moment of the day, and they're posting on social media their reactions to that moment of the day and having a discussion around it. The other thing I'll add on, just relevant to the last question, around why have different domains represented. We've talked about even having something where you shake the phone physically and it gives you sort of like rolling a die and you get some sort of different activity. We've also talked about sorting, being able to sort by domains. So if you go into the app and, we've done a ton of user research, and, some users tell us, we don't ask me to draw, I do not draw. Or some users will say, don't ask me to write, I do not write, don't show me those moments. And so we initially thought, okay, well, maybe we should make it so that you can filter that out or you can search by your domain of choice. But based on our understanding of the research, and again, I'm not a psych expert, but based on talking with this awesome team that we have, the understanding was like it's better for people's generalized creativity to have access to many different domains and to break out of their home domain. So there are some very direct, explicit choices that we've made to try effectively get people out of their comfort zone a little bit and try different domains. I'm an example. I'm very comfortable writing. I'm very comfortable taking photos. I don't think of myself as somebody who's good at drawing. And so drawing is a little stressful for me, but I find I can feel my brain growing when I try to draw because it's something new for me, but I don't necessarily want to do it every day.
Well, I was intrigued when you said there's a LinkedIn group where different people can post comments or reactions if they're all doing the same activity. Could you say a little bit more about that LinkedIn group and the way that social media might play a role in the app?
100%. So that LinkedIn group was very specific to another limited rebellion and what they call their creative sprint. So that was just a private group that was just there for a month. But I will say, I think that the function of it being a private group was really positive because people opted into it and they were all there to support each other. Nobody's trolling, nobody's there to give somebody a hard time. We've thought a lot about how to integrate sharing within the app. Currently, you cannot share the things that you make within the app. So that's a really complicated and expensive thing to build. And we sort of said, okay, let's not try to rebuild Instagram. So currently, we're asking people to share on platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram. We have an Instagram page, our account, and people can post. We encourage people to post with the hashtag #GetMessier. And there you can see creations that people have done where the hashtag is not totally taken off yet, but we're brand new. So hopefully people hearing this can post with Get Messier and see what other folks are doing around the world. The nice thing about LinkedIn is that it's generally the tenor is very positive. And so we have a Messier LinkedIn page where we're planning to make a longer running LinkedIn group where people can post their Messier moment creations. So stay tuned for that. Eventually, we can get into this later. Eventually, we want to, of course, build functionality for people to share within the app. And one of the design goals of the app is to kind of kill the inner critic or attenuate the inner critic. And of course, social media is famous for boosting the inner critic's powers. And so we're just giving a lot of thought to how can we create something from a design perspective that makes people excited to share, and that when they share, it builds them up rather than adding to their anxieties.
I love this idea of sharing the creations that you do as part of the activities. And even if you can't do them through the app, something I was thinking of as I was using the app is I was thinking of some of the creativity workshops that I do for companies. And then I see on your board of advisors, you have people like Micah Scalen and Jacoby who do this sort of consulting for corporations. So if you have, let's say, a room full of 50 people and they're all doing something or making something, then they'd be sharing it with people sitting at their round table. And I think that could be a really powerful use of something like this, where you have a large number of people doing it together.
100%. And we've been doing a few live events as part of the launch, and we just did one at First Friday in Oakland, which is in Oakland, California, where I live. There's a very well loved, the first Friday of the month is kind of open galleries. I know they have that in a lot of cities. And we set up at a gallery with a big table with, Play-Doh and markers and all kinds of art supplies. And the moment of the day, the prompt was make a representation of your inner critic. And so we had, people coming through that were just coming through to look at art, and they saw, people's eyes got wide when they saw Play-Doh in particular. We had multiple people say, I haven't touched Play-Doh in 30 years. And it was just so fun for people to, you had people on dates who were getting to know each other through it. You had absolute strangers who were meeting. You had, of course, a few kids who just ran to the table and got locked in immediately. And then at the end, we had this amazing wall of inner critics. And, it was Play-Doh and drawings and poems from dozens of people who had come throughout the night. And so, yeah, that's a really fun way to build community among people, spark conversation. And we have in the app specifically, you can sort for activities for the workplace. So like a workplace connection category, basically. So very much hoping people will use it in that way.
It's interesting that you mentioned this idea of engaging in a process, or at least I was hearing some conversation about this, because my own focus on creativity is the creative process, or the moments that occur while you're engaged in a creative process. So the fact that you call these activities Messier moments, I really resonate with that. And I think I've the same thing with Zorana as a creativity researcher, this interest in the process of creativity and the moments and the mindsets that you engage in as you're going through this process. So I like that focus of the app. It's focused on moments in the process, getting people through the process. And Zorana, I wanted to ask you about that as well, this notion of mindsets and how mindsets could enhance the creative process, and how you see the Messier app tapping into that mindset research.
I think that is a very big part of the app. What mindsets are implicit ideas about the nature of creativity. And the one of the mindsets that was most frequently studied is growth versus fixed mindset. And it has really captured imagination in our culture, with growth mindset being the idea that creativity can be increased. It can be increased with training, with learning, with experience, with trying things out. It is not a fixed trait that you are born with, and that is as much as you were given when creativity talent was being set aside for individuals. So we are not born with these beliefs. We acquire these beliefs through our experience, through education, through interactions with culture, through different role models that we might have. One of my favorite studies in research on mindsets on creativity was done by Maciej Karwowski and his colleagues in Poland. And it was an experiment where they gave a description of creativity to one group of people, stressing what we call in the research world the big C creativity of geniuses, eminent creators. Think Marie Curie, think Steve Jobs, think Claude Monet. Names that we can remember even if they lived centuries ago. And to another group of people, they gave a description of creativity as something that is about original solutions to everyday problems, and that it is about engaging with the world in new and effective ways. And there, the models will be people around us, people in our friends, our family, our coworkers, those that we know. And what they found is that these two groups of people who got different messages of what creativity is had quite different, significantly different mindsets about creativity. Those who were presented big C, eminent creative models were much more likely to have a fixed mindset of creativity, as opposed to those who were presented more everyday examples or professional examples of creativity, who had more growth model. And it makes sense, right? If we know that we are not an Einstein or Monet, it is very hard to imagine ourselves being able to measure up and be in their company. So why even try? And it makes sense then that they are born with it, with some special kind of overwhelming talent.
Right. This notion of the contrast between big C or historically impactful creativity and little c playing a big role in creativity research. And I wasn't familiar with that study showing that, these are ways that you can enhance someone's growth mindset for, you could call maybe creative self-efficacy. Is that right?
Yeah, so in this particular study, they were examining the growth mindset, but growth mindset is very much related to creative self efficacy. So, creative self efficacy is the belief, yes, I can. Yes, I am able to do something creative. If you are presented a task, you review it and you have a sense and a belief that you can contribute and solve it and address it in a creative and effective way. We don't always start up with very high self efficacy on a project or a task. Wonderful research was done by Rogelio Puente Diaz in Mexico, who has followed people as they worked on a semester long project. So these were business school students, and they were working on real life design project. And they started off not having very strong self efficacy. And as they engaged and worked on the problem, the self efficacy increased as they noticed that they had successes, that they were making progress. Teresa Amabile at the Harvard Business School called it the progress principle of creativity. There is this virtuous cycle. With some progress, there is more belief that you can do it, and greater self efficacy. And with that, more engagement, and then more progress, and eventually success.
I myself like to think about mindsets when I think about how creativity works or how people get through a creative process. For example, in interviews I've been doing with professional artists and designers, they have a set of mindsets or practices that tend to make it more likely that they'll be successful. So, for example, a certain awareness about what's going on around them, this ability to see things that other people are looking at, but they just don't see them because they don't have this awareness mindset. And then a second practice or mindset I tend to see in creatives is the I don't know if you call it instinct to start working with material objects quickly, early in the process, to get your ideas out in the world while they're still tentative and ill-formed. To make something and engage with materials is a mindset I see with a lot of successful creators. And Josh, I was thinking about the creative process that led to the design of Messier. And I think you had a lot of creatives, like designers, you had a lot involved, like your chief design officer, Mark Lyon. And it seems to me that he's an expert in this type of design process or the mindsets associated with successful designers. So what role would you say people like that played in developing the app?
So this is one of my favorite topics, and I know you, based on your book, Group Genius, this is something you've thought a lot about, building creative groups. I was in bands when I was younger, and I went to business school at Fuqua at Duke, and where sort of the idea of cognitive diversity, and there's this whole Team Fuqua thing coming out of Duke as a sports school, just the power and the magic of teams. So from day one, I kind of had this idea around Messier, like how let's build something that helps people be more creative, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. And so at some point pretty early on, I realized, okay, I need people with design expertise. And when I say design, I'm thinking sort of design with a capital D, like, think IDEO and user-centered design. And we're lucky in the Bay Area to have a ton of really talented designers. So started talking to friends and asking for introductions, and eventually was connected with Mark. And Mark is just an amazing guy in a lot of ways. But to your point, he's just not afraid to just like, let's just start making something, tonight, and we'll put something out there and see how it works. And I also, by the way, did that, very early on. The idea before I met Mark, just hired some developers to make what was called Creo, and we just put something out on the App Store. Looking back, it wasn't very good, but I'm very, it allowed us to show people, okay, this is kind of what we have in mind. And that was kind of like, it gave people something to react to, which I find in itself can be really powerful. Have an MVP, a minimum viable product, something simple that, of course, that's not the product that's going to take over the world, but it's something that at least people can react to. So back to Mark. Mark actually started out as a painter. He's run a digital design studio for 25 years, but he has a bachelor's in painting from California College of the Arts, CCA. And I live in Oakland, where CCA is based. And it just turns out that those are our people. So a friend posted that we were looking for folks to work on this project on the CCA Slack community. And we just got some incredible people, particularly through CCA has what they call a DMBA, or Design MBA. And so it's a user-centered design program that just has some incredibly bright people that go through really deep design process. And so not only do we have Mark, who has an incredible perspective and experience on design, but we've also had a couple of other really talented people, Anna Drabick, Mary Wilder, and others who come with that design perspective. And they sort of do everything they can to just get to know and understand users. And I would say their superpower is empathy, just being able to really understand how people are engaging with a product or an idea. So in this case, it was like, let's do everything that we can to get in front of people and understand what creativity means to them. So, we started out with very small pilots, no app, just emailing people. Let's get people to do a creative activity once a day for 2 weeks, and then later for a month, and then interview them about the process. We've done surveys online. We've even done what they call street intercepts, which is like, we had an intrepid intern go to a supermarket in Berkeley, set up a table out front, and just talk to people about creativity. And we actually learned a ton that we ended up putting into the app.
Oh, that's a great idea. One of my graduate students, I should give the assignment to go to the grocery store. I love it.
Absolutely.
Right. And we could even see Zorana's research with big C and little c creativity, applying that to the grocery store. You could do that sort of thing at UC Berkeley, I guess. I think I could do it in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Sure.
I mean, we set up a table at a park in Oakland, and this is when we had an early, what they call a wireframe. So it's not an actual version of the app, but it's sort of a fake version of the app, but it's on a phone, and people can click on a few things and play around with it. And we wanted to get people's reactions. So we set up at a really busy park in Oakland. And one of the main moment that was on the app was do a dance that evokes a thunderstorm. And at first, when we got out there, we're like, oh, shoot, like that was kind of a funny, like goofy moment that we thought was kind of cute amongst us as a group, but like, who's going to actually do that? And we were shocked to see that, something like 10 or 20% of the people that we gave the phone just immediately did that dance. Like that was, so, it's really fun to do those in real life interactions, because you just learn so much more than you would learn from a survey.
It's such an important part of the design process in general, this idea of getting something out in the world quickly, whether you call it a prototype or a mock-up, or of course a wireframing on your phone, just getting it out there, watching how users respond, and then revising it or pivoting, or sometimes I talk about zigs and zags or a zigzag process. But to get started, you have to get something out into the world. And I saw that a lot with the Messier activities. A lot of them involved making something or drawing something or cooking something, right, with a culinary creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I would say, like, if we have one goal, again, it's to kill the inner critic, or dial down people's inner critic very, very significantly. And the only way that I know of to do that is by just getting people to start creative processes over and over and over again, and just not being afraid of that blank page and not being afraid of starting. And we think that if we can get people to practice that once a day or at least a few times a week, then we've won.
Right. Then you've won. Absolutely. Well, I wanted to give a shout out to Zorana. I see on your website that you just last month, you won a $1 million grant from the Templeton Religion Trust. And I was reading your description of what you're going to do. And oh, it really resonated with me, the study of emotion and cognition. And as I'm listening to Josh talk about the creative process and the design process, to me, I'm a cognitive psychologist, so I can see the mental structures and processes, things that go on in your mind while you're engaging in these different steps in the creative process or in the design process. So, congratulations. I'm really excited to see you getting funding to do this important work.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are very excited to do the work, and it is going to really dive into the process of art appreciation and how it is related to the creative process of the artists.
And to some extent, maybe even tapping into a book that I have coming out later this year called Learning to See, about mindsets or ways of looking at the world associated with successful art and design creativity. But even though in the book I don't talk about cognitive psychology, it's not an academic book, but always in the back of my mind is, of course, the knowledge of the creativity research, right? You can't turn it off as you're looking at how people really work when they're engaged in creativity.
Exactly. And that really, it made me think of another aspect that is interesting in Messier. It's this very explicit acknowledgement that people engage in creative activities for different reasons. Research on creativity and motivation for a long time has looked at the distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, where intrinsic motivation is engaging in an activity because of enjoyment in it and the thrill of challenge that it poses, whereas extrinsic motivation is preoccupied with the external rewards of various kinds. And the research has now moved into more specific motives that people can have to engage with creative work, in particular, pro-social motivation, wanting to engage with something because there are problems to be tackled in the world. And we see a lot of interest in the young generation. I am on a college campus around climate change and this urgency for action and need for creative solutions. And another big motivation is emotion regulation, doing creative activities for the sake of coping better with challenges of life. We know that creative activities can be a very constructive way of distracting ourselves from something that is distressing or unpleasant in the moment. That distraction would not be necessarily permanent. It is not necessarily the only thing that matters in emotion regulation, but it really helps in the short term. And the app is explicitly incorporating these different needs in asking a user, hey, why are you here today? What could be helpful today?
So you think there is a dimension of the emotional aspect of creativity, right?
Exactly. As we learn more about the motives for creativity, we are realizing that people engage for many different reasons, including emotion related reasons.
I like the potential of social media. And again, as I'm looking at the app on my phone and I see it organized into these bite-sized chunks or activities or messier moments, and there's 500 of them in the app. But Josh, I think you could open it up and make it a platform where any user could come up with their own activity and then they could post it to the shared creative community. So you start with 500 now, and then maybe you would have thousands of them as everyone contributes. Is that something you've thought about?
100%. Yeah. From day one. So we call that, user generated content. So it's kind of like think YouTube or Instagram, anything where people are submitting their own content. We absolutely want to do that. We'll do it in small ways soon. So things like the partnership with Another Limited Rebellion in May, where we're using their content and putting it on the app. Or, we've talked with specific artists and creators, and we'll sort of have them take over the app for a week at a time, and we'll do just moments that they've created. We've also talked with community organizations in Oakland. There's a really cool group called Chapter 510 that's kind of the McSweeney's 826 Valencia, a place to help kids get creative and students get creative. Them have students write messier moments for us. So really looking forward to that. As far as automating the ability to have people upload moments and put them in the app, that's going to take a little while, because anytime you're letting people put in content directly into something, you have to moderate it and make sure they don't put anything inappropriate in there, because you don't want the app to be usable for students, for example. So we have to figure out the sort of content moderation piece before we go really scale that, but it's absolutely part of the vision. And it fits the sort of mindset of the app, is that, we're going to get the best ideas when we let, everybody try something.
Well, yeah. And in terms of opening up the app, a few minutes ago, Zorana was talking about misconceptions that a lot of people have about creativity. And I think one of the strengths of Messier is that it is grounded in creativity research, and each of the activities you have passed by a board of scientific advisors. So you wouldn't want people putting up activities that are reproducing myths about creativity, or
Yeah.
you'd want to retain that, I don't know, can I say legitimacy, having that connection with creative expertise.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for the foreseeable future, there would have to, even if people are submitting, we've even talked about, we could just put up a Google form and people could submit ideas. But even those we'd want to have people take a look at before we put them into the app.
Well, Josh, everyone's been hearing a lot about artificial intelligence and the impact it might have on the creative community, whether it's creative industries and people who make their living in creativity, or whether it's the rest of us who think we could benefit from having a creative assistant right there. So how do you see, is there any connection between Messier and all these developments in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, AI has completely changed the way that we think about Messier and how and even why we do Messier. So I think that the use case and the case for helping people build their creative life is even stronger now, because we believe that we're helping people effectively stay human. And that's increasingly important in the era of AI. And at the same time, we're using AI to build the product, right? So of those 500 Messier moments, there's a very deep use of AI in making them. Now, of course, we can't just say to ChatGPT, make us a bunch of great creative prompts, because when you ask it to do that, it frankly gave us junk. So we did work with a few different AIs to flesh out some of the parts of the moments. For example, we might have one cool idea for a photography, moment. So like, take a picture of an everyday object from unexpected angles, and you can feed that into an AI and it'll give you some pretty cool iterations on that idea. So we certainly used it for the generative side. Everything that you see in the app's been deeply edited and ultimately is really human made, but a lot of input from AI. And then on the visuals for the app, so each Messier moment has a graphic that goes with it, and those are all AI generated. And that was not just press a button. That was something that, we work really deeply with AI to have a visual representation that actually ties to the text in the moment. And I think if we had more funding and more resources, ideally we would have human-made art for each Messier moment. But in the absence of those resources, we made, I think, some pretty cool visuals, starting with the AI. I guess the last thing that we'll say around AI is that I hear a lot of angst around AI is going to take over creativity. What's even the point of being creative if you have all this really powerful AI? To which I say, look, you could program a robot to do really jaw-droppingly amazing yoga moves, but I do yoga because it feels good and it's good for my body. Like I'm not going to turn that over to a robot anytime soon. Likewise, if you think about creativity as something that's not all about the product, that's not all about the world-changing painting that you did, but it's rather about the process that you do for your own mental health and happiness and well-being, then keeping that act of creativity alive is probably more important than ever now. So again, it's AI has changed how we work and really why we're doing what we do.
Well, the first thing I noticed when I opened the app is that it's beautiful. That's why the first thing I thought of was a virtual creativity card deck, because each one looks like artwork that you could put on a card, and there's so many of them, right? So there's 500, and I was thinking maybe these were generated by Midjourney, but I would have to say they're far better than the average Midjourney generated art. So you probably had some really good prompt engineering for your artwork.
Yeah. That was a creative problem solving kind of epic in its own to get to those. I won't go into all the details there, but it absolutely was a really fun technical challenge to overcome. And we wouldn't have gotten there if it weren't for a really awesome human eye in my co-founder, Mark.
Right. Well, why couldn't you just put the text of the activity into Midjourney and then just see the image that comes out? Because the images are pretty obviously connected to the activity.
So you have to tell Midjourney what you want to do with that text. And if you give, because of the way the AIs work, because of basically the number of characters they can handle, if you give it too much input, it will actually just give you trash. So we had to give it a very concise description of the moment. So it had to be like under, I think, 200 words. And then it had to be couched within a prompt that says, hey, Midjourney or whichever AI we were using at the time, we want you to create art that does X, Y, and Z, and that does not do, A, B, and C. And then even when we had a really, I think, elegant prompt architecture, we of course had to figure out a way to multiply that by 500 and more. But then even when we had a good architecture, it would spit out junk, I would say 40% of the time at least. And so we actually asked it to make 5 or 6, I think 5 graphics for each moment. And then we manually actually went into, 500 batches of 5 and chose the best one. So we're just not quite in the era of AI yet where you can press a button and do it for you. So it was a lot of kind of us partnering with the AI, but I agree. I think it's beautiful. I'm really proud of it. But it took us a lot of work to get there.
Right. Yeah. I've never heard the term prompt architecture, but I like it. Prompt engineering, I feel like I've heard that one. But yeah, prompt architecture, I like it.
I think that the way that Messier developers have used AI is a great example of AI as a tool. It can, I like history, and I like using historical analogies. When photography was first invented, there was a lot of writing about this is going to be the end of painting. People will never be interested in painting again because now we have a machine that can take exact likeness of a scene. But not only that did not happen, and we still have painting to this day, but we also have photography as a whole other artistic domain. The photographic camera became a tool for new developments and used in many different ways. I think that a similar thing can happen with AI that we have at this time. And we see how Messier has used it in development, and research is emerging to show how it can be used as a tool together with humans, where humans are doing a lot of the part of judgment that AI at this time at least is not very good at, and lots of what creativity researchers call problem finding. What are the good questions? It cannot pose questions on its own. We are posing those questions. We are doing that prompt engineering, which is different ways of asking the questions. And then the tool is helping different parts of the process.
Well, as a researcher, I wonder if there's some way we might be able to use Messier as a research tool, or if there's some way to either study how people are using it or adapt it in some way to blend with an existing research project. So, Zorana and Josh, as you're coming together as researchers and developers, is there some way moving forward that we might bring together creativity research and the Messier app?
Sure, I can start on that one, and Zorana, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. It's absolutely one of our motivations to use the app to work with researchers. And of course, there are some kind of ethical and legal, things that we have to iron out. But I'm not too concerned about those. For example, people, giving permission to use their data. So we want to be really clear about how people's data is being used. But absolutely would love, particularly when we get on the scale of hundreds and of thousands to millions of users, we think that we can have some really valuable insights about ways in which people are creative and kind of what they get out of creativity. What are their motivators to seek creative time? How are they creative socially? How are they creative within organizations? So really excited about Messier as a tool for research. But Zorana, I'm sure you have much more articulate thoughts on this.
I certainly have ideas. This is, again, we are talking about tools. It can be a tool and opportunity for researchers. I have had the fortune of working on another app called How We Feel, and their users are given an option to donate their data anonymously for research purposes. And we are learning a lot. We are learning what kinds of feelings are related to different experiences. I am very much interested in this emotional component of the creative process. And people are sometimes coming into the app and seeking creativity as a tool of emotion regulation. And the app could provide a way of seeing and testing whether people who come with those needs are, to what extent and how they are getting those needs met, and what is the effect on our feelings and their well-being based on engagement in creative activities.
Well, that's wonderful. I think the two of you really could, and of course the rest of your team really could make some progress there. Well, I want to congratulate you again, Zorana, for your success at the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, getting this $1 million grant. And Josh, I'll give you the last word. Could you pick maybe one of the activities or one of the Messier moments that our listeners might be able to do later today or in the coming week?
Absolutely. I would say, so if you go into the app, you'll see, of course, the first thing is the moment of the day, but then you'll see a carousel that you can scroll horizontally called latest releases. So it should be reasonably easy to find. And this is one of my favorites. It's called Wobble World. So the prompt is, and if you don't mind, I'll just read it. Imagine everyone has suddenly lost their sense of balance and is unable to stay upright. Envision how this would affect the world around you. Think about different aspects: mobility, healthcare, daily life, infrastructure, economy, lovemaking, psychology, and scientific research. Write down as many consequences and effects as you can. Try to consider both immediate and long-term implications. And so if they scroll down even further, they'll see variations. So they can, of course, they could write this down. They could do drawings. They could even do a dance that evokes Wobble World. So my pick is Wobble World, but of course, don't ask me to choose my favorite child because I love them all equally.
Okay, I promise I'll do it. Wobble
Awesome.
as soon as we're done. I think I could do it. Maybe in private and not out on the sidewalk. And you two, you can both promise to do it too.
Awesome.
Well, thank you both, Dr. Zorana Ivcevic Pringle and Josh Seidenfeld. It's been great to have you on The Science of Creativity. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
It's been a real pleasure.
I really enjoyed today's interview with Josh and Zorana. I'm a creativity researcher, and I generally focus on new scientific findings, but I also think it's important to translate the new scientific research into practice. It's important for researchers to get themselves off of the university campus and then join together with designers and developers and consultants to apply their research. As a researcher myself, I think that every app should have such a wonderful team of scientific advisors. There's so much exciting and powerful research in the science of creativity. Thank you for listening to The Science of Creativity. If you liked this episode, I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast, and please rate the show because that helps others like you hear about the show. Please write in the comments if you have requests or ideas for future episodes. I'll see you next time on The Science of Creativity for insights and inspiration about art, design, and invention.